Welcome back to Federal Insights, going beyond data protection, sponsored by Veritas here on Federal News Network. We heard from Prem Jadwani, the Chief Technology Officer for Government Acquisitions, and from Kurt Steege, the Chief Technology Officer of Thundercat Technology. Now we are going to hear from Mike Malaret, the Director of Sales Engineering for Veritas Federal. I'm Tom Temin. Mike, good to have you with us. Let's talk about the size and scope of the ransomware threat. What does it look like writ large as we are, basically early 2022 at this point?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Prem actually touched a little bit on this topic earlier, that there's a ransomware attack every 11 seconds. And the estimated cost is expected to reach over $20 billion in damages for 2021. In addition to that, we see that the Ponemon Institute's report on data breach in 2021 says that the average cost is now up to $4.24 million per incident, which is pretty striking. And most companies may not be able to be planning for that or necessarily have the means to be able to address that. And then I had the opportunity a few weeks back to actually interview Matthew Riddle, the Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity and Operations at the CIA. And even then, Matthew Riddle, one of the comments that he made is he was very aware that they are not even immune to cyber attacks. So I think everybody is at risk. And everybody is at risk of ransomware, one of the cyber attacks.
All right, so the next question then is the idea of resiliency, because organizations can't keep handing out $4 million bills or $20 million bills. So how do you make your organization, again, from a data standpoint and a data protection standpoint, resilient to this so that you're not harmed by it?
Yeah, I think that's something that's interesting because everybody always refers to backups as being one of the key categories of being able to actually recover from a ransomware incident, but there's a little bit more to it than just that, right? So we've started looking at data protection and recovery and resiliency as a key strategy to be able to actually come back. The Colonial Pipeline incident let us realize that if you cannot recover in a sufficient time, you're still at risk and you may wind up having to pay a ransom anywhere in order to be able to get your data unlocked. So it's really critical that people put together a resiliency solution that allows them to actually rehearse the recovery, how they can look to ways to minimize the cost of that resiliency. And we'll talk about that in the effective backup strategies too as well.
Yeah, okay, so it's a multi-pronged approach though. You can't just start with backup and assume you can rely totally on that. You really have to do some groundwork leading to your backup strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. It would go from having an identification of what needs to be recovered first and having a full detailed set of plans that is outlined, and then have recovery rehearsals for all of those things that are mission critical, and then how do you actually do that in another infrastructure? Because it's one thing to actually be able to stand up a solution or recover a solution, but if you have to also format everything out, it could take a very long time to erase all of the encrypted data that would exist within an environment and even get to the point that you're ready. So being able to have a more comprehensive plan of how to be able to create a just-in-time infrastructure is very critical to your success from a recovery standpoint.
And what does an effective backup system then in this scenario look like today?
Yeah, so we look at it from three different areas. Protect, detect, and recover is one of the slogans that Veritas actually has. So the data protection is very critical. The detection of anomaly is very critical in your environment, and then your ability to recover at scale or recover into an alternate location very quickly and rapidly, right? Again, it goes back to that idea that you have to have those detailed plans on recovery. We actually employ machine learning and artificial intelligence for our anomaly detection. We detect for anomalies during the backup ingest process when the backup images are erased, and we also do it when we're actually restoring. So if something new comes along that we weren't able to detect early on and you can detect now, you'd be able to detect it in the recovery process, which is pretty critical to be able to do. One of the things we're doing from a resiliency standpoint is we've incorporated our resiliency platform directly into the net backup software, which allows us to be able to actually plan and provide continuous data protection to a company where you could actually store one of your images. The best practices, I think, were stated earlier about having at least 3 backup copies one of your backup image copies could actually be cloud-based. And when it's cloud-based, if you have a cloud recovery server running up there, you actually have the ability to do immediate recovery into the cloud on brand new infrastructure. And as long as you're able to make sure you're not bringing the malware back in, you have a much better opportunity to be able to recover. And then you're also not paying for that entire infrastructure up front. So it's only when you need it, And then immutability becomes very, very important in the architecture, right? How do you actually create immutable backup images and then be able to append those images over time? And that's something that we've actually spent a lot of investments in being able to do, whether it's immutable in the cloud storage, taking advantage of, immutable cloud storage, or immutable storage that we actually put together in our system. And then the platform that you're running your data protection and recovery solutions on really has to actually be hardened, but more than just hardened. One thing that we've done is we've actually taken SE Linux and made that the core operating system. SE Linux, everything is off by default. It is a true zero trust operating system environment. So we only open up what is absolutely 100% necessary in order to be able to communicate. In addition to that, we've taken the net backup product and we've actually put it into containers. Containers allow us to actually segment off the individual workload. And really, we have only one persistent container, and that is the actual data storage. And that data storage, by default, SE Linux, can only be talked to by one of the other containers. So something can't come in and then just all of a sudden start writing to that. And then we have the best practices for containers to be able to do certificates and authentications where the containers, even though we know if this container should be able to, it still has to be able to properly authenticate. And it's definitely a much more sophisticated ability to be able to ensure that your backup images will be there. And then the final piece is, how do you actually provide for instant recovery too as well? How can you bring up multiple machines on your backup infrastructure in order to be able to get mission critical applications up and running in seconds?
All right, so you've given us a very comprehensive strategy backed up by some real technological pieces, and that's excellent. Mike Malaret is Director of Sales Engineering for Veritas Federal. Earlier, we heard from Prem Jadwani, the Chief Technology Officer for Government Acquisitions, Inc., and from Kurt Steege, the Chief Technology Officer of Thundercat Technology. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Veritas.